These delicate pieces of jewellery were made about 1500 years ago by the Mochica people. Even then, gold working in this part of the world was an ancient technique with a history 2,000 years long. The earliest technique was to hammer the gold into thin sheets and then press a design into it by resting the sheets on a yielding surface like leather and scoring the pattern with a pointed tool. They also knew how to cut the gold sheets and bend them into shape. Using these techniques, the Mochica made this golden pouch in the shape of a puma. The Chimu, in the 13th century, had gold in such abundance that they used it to cover entire walls. Their temple door carried nearly half a ton of gold, and when a priest died, his hands and arms were encased in golden gloves. This figure of a priest is one of the Chimu masterpieces of gold work. It was their goldsmiths who brought the craft to its peak, and this one piece, which is a ceremonial knife, displays all their techniques. The outer border of the headdress is cast. In the center, the gold is encrusted with turquoise. The face is made from metal that has been hammered into a sheet, and its features have been embossed into it. The body and the legs are formed by wrapping the metal round a wooden core. And the blade was attached to the body by soldering. But the Chimu Empire eventually fell to an even more powerful people, the Incas. The Incas had a civilization just as sophisticated as that of the Aztecs. They built great cities. This is Machu Picchu behind me. And like the Aztecs too, they worshipped the sun. The most sacred place in that city is the Intihuatana, literally the hitching post of the sun, where the priests could tether the sun by ritual, and so from the shadow cast by the spike in the middle, calculate the equinoxes and the seasons of the year. In that time, the Incas were unsurpassed as masons. They built the most elegant and complex structures, like that circular tower. And what's more, they built them out of granite, one of the hardest of rocks. And the only things they had to work the granite with were stone tools and bronze tools and sand with which to polish the surface. And they constructed the blocks so accurately that they are put together without any mortar whatsoever. This is the house of one of their noblemen or priests, and around it, as nearly all Inca houses have, are niches. Here they would have placed their golden idols. They cut these blocks all sorts of shapes and sizes. Sometimes they cut it out of the living rock, as here. This corner piece is one huge boulder out of which they have cut this angle here. And the walls of this building slope slightly inwards, and that, together with the irregular blocks which key into one another, means that these buildings have stood in this zone of very heavy, frequent earthquakes for 500 years. And when you look at these blocks, and with the loving care and skill with which the edges have been chamfered, and the way that corner just fits into that there, you can't help but feel that they actually took a positive delight in craftsmanship of this quality. And if that's the case, perhaps, too, they took a real delight in placing their cities and laying them out so beautifully on high plateaus like this, way, way up above the clouds. The Inca civilization is dead, but the Inca people still live in the high Andes and still speak the Inca language, Quechua. In Inca times, all had to pay tribute to the emperor. Some paid in labor, and some with the beautiful, intricately woven textiles that are still made from the wool of llamas and alpacas. As well as textiles, the emperor also demanded tribute in gold. This was the most sacred place in the whole of the Inca Empire. This is the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun, in Cuzco, the Inca capital. Cuzco is still today a busy city, the most important one in this part of the Andes. But little is left of the Coricancha beyond these massive bastions. But in its heyday, the Coricancha was a place of unbelievable splendor. In the springtime, when the priests had to conduct rituals to ensure the fertility of the ground, these terraces were planted with corn, corn as high as my shoulder, but corn the stems of which and the leaves of which were made from solid silver, and the corn cobs of which were made of gold. And among the cornfields, there were llamas grazing, tended by shepherds, all built out of gold. And elsewhere in the temple, there were gardens with trees and butterflies and birds and lizards, all made out of silver and emeralds and gold. And of all that splendor, all that remains are a few tiny little golden figurines, like this one, which lay undetected in the ruins for centuries. Just as the Incas called gold the sweat of the sun, so they called silver the tears of the moon. Their country was rich in that as well, and they worked it with equal skill, ingenuity, and wit. The greed of the Spanish invaders on seeing this spectacular treasure was unbounded. They captured Atahualpa, the Inca emperor, and held him to ransom for as much gold as it took to fill a room from floor to ceiling. The Incas paid the price and more. The Spaniards took the gold, and then they murdered Atahualpa. And so the Inca people, who had once been masters of the Andes and had created one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the New World, became slaves. In their search for the precious metals, the Spaniards demolished whole towns, tore down temples to their very foundations, and then, as foreign conquerors so often do, they built their own churches on the ruins.